The councilors would take their seats, please. Have you heard from Mr. Corey?
I have not.
Thank you, Dave.
We need to call him.
Sue can get a hold of him.
You think you said?
Mr. Mayor, I believe when we were trying to schedule this special session, there was an email from Councilor Corey saying he was unavailable tonight.
Yes, that's correct.
He will be absent.
Yes.
He will be absent.
All right.
You're right. Sorry.
Then I'm going to go ahead and bring this study session to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Mayor, all present with the exception of Councilor Mike Corey.
And that is an excused absence.
Correct.
Thank you. Good evening, council. Good evening, representatives of TVF&R and those that are in the audience. We thank you for being here. Our purpose this evening is to gather information about the possible annexation process, its process, and the cost of fire service. And I know that there are counselors that have numerous questions that need to be answered. They will be raising questions also that the staff has seen and I have seen that have been raised by email and Facebook. But we're here to gather information and to provide instruction eventually to the staff. No decisions will be made perhaps later in April. The counselors will have multiple questions for us at this time. There is an agenda where we have presentations to be made by Tualatin Valley Rural Fire, or Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue. And we also have presentations that from staff that you, the council, have been asking questions on, that we'll try to get some of those things out. So with that, we have had the roll call out of the way. I'm going to call on by the way, just so that there's no misunderstanding, this is a study session. This is for the council. We invite the public in to hear what's going on, but we will not be taking any testimony this evening. So we appreciate your patience on that, and I hope it is as good a learning session for you as it is for the council, for those that are in attendance with us. So with that, I'm going to call on TVF&R, and Les, are you going to kick it off? Yes. You'd introduce place the button on the right, introduce yourself or yourselves, and proceed with your presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council, City Staff. I'm Les Hallman with Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue, and along with me today is Stephen Myers and also Brian Sherrard, both with Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue. Thank you for inviting us and being here tonight. We're going to provide some background and current status of the delivery of fire and EMS services to the city of Newberg. We're also going to discuss options of a very open, very public process in which you will be able to hear from your community and their desires for fire and EMS delivery going forward. We will discuss the procedures required by the state of Oregon for the city of Newberg to join with TVF&R permanently should you decide that TVF&R is the best method of providing a long-term sustainable delivery of fire and EMS. And finally, we want to go over the critical timeline and direction we need from you on how to move forward. So what led the city of Newberg to request a contract for delivery of fire and EMS services from TVF&R? There were several factors which blended together to create what I call the perfect storm. Not unlike the situation that many other cities in our area, as well as throughout the United States, have found themselves facing. Limited staffing and a rising call volume had truly placed the city's fire and EMS under a tremendous strain. The city had not been in a financial situation to increase fire and EMS staffing services since 2006. And yet there was over a 40% increase in demands for service over the 10 years leading up to 2016. The city's fire EMS delivery model included utilizing a combination of both career and volunteer firefighters. It relied on volunteers to staff the city's 2 needed fire engines overnight, which have become increasingly difficult to achieve. There is a nationwide shortage of volunteer firefighters. Rising training requirements and dual income families are just a couple of the reasons that it makes it extremely challenging to be a volunteer firefighter in this day and age. Asking a person to spend 14 hours overnight on duty in the fire station is a lot to ask of a volunteer. It was becoming exceedingly difficult to get volunteers to staff the engines overnight, which on a regular basis led to having only 2 career firefighters staffing 1 fire engine overnight. Having a single fire engine with 2 firefighters on duty for a city of this size is far below national industry standards. On top of that, the increasing call volume with limited staffing has also placed a serious strain on the career firefighters. Due to the city's limited revenues, there did not appear to be any sign of relief. We had the perfect storm. And as your fire chief, I had become increasingly concerned over the safety of our community and the safety of our firefighters. I continue to be so thankful that you agreed to provide a contract with TVF&R. Newberg's fire and EMS services are now being delivered at the proper level. With that, Chief Sherrard will now provide you with an overview of what the TVF&R contract has provided.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. As you know, excuse me?
Identify yourself.
Brian Sherrard, Division Chief, Tualatin Valley Fire.
Thank you.
As you know, the contract with TVF&R and the City of Newberg commenced July 1st, 2016. Immediately upon taking over the fire service and EMS here in the City of Newberg, Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue took the staffing levels that Chief Hallman just spoke to a 3-person engine company and truck company at 2 stations, along with the 2-person medic units that responded out of each station. And then starting June 1st of this coming year, or of this year, we'll be increasing that staffing to 4 people on the engine and 4 people on the truck company. In addition to that, there's a battalion chief, which is a command officer, which oversees all of our assets within the city and other portions of Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue that's on duty 24/7 now out of the Springbrook Fire Station. In addition to that, we instituted minimum staffing levels for the water rescue team that responds out of Station 21. As far as upgrades, we've done significant upgrades to both stations on both communications and infrastructure, as well as adding 2 newer medic units to the system and a newer truck company that responds out of Station 20. One of the biggest assets that Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue brings to this community is our depth of resources that are available. It's not just the 2 fire stations that are here within the city. It's actually 25 fire stations and all of the assets and personnel that are able to respond from throughout Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue. On a very regular basis, we're constantly shifting our resources and bringing them to the areas that have the highest call volume. The City of Newberg being one of those very high call volume areas with the ASA and only having the 2 medic units responding out of here. There's been times where we had 5 TVF&R medic units all in the City of Newberg at the same time. So it's a constant battle and shifting of those resources and the duplication of those resources, which bring the highest level of service to the constituents here in the City of Newberg. In addition to that, the training that's provided through TVF&R and those additional resources, we move resources down into the city, which enables the companies here in Newberg to go pursue training that's outside of the city when necessary, especially the water rescue team, as well as advanced life support training and technical training based on fires and vehicle extrications. In addition, one of the things that we know is super important to the community and as well one of the things that we promised as we came in to provide the service here, and that's continuing the tradition of all the events and community-related services that were important to the city, we're going to continue to provide those things at the highest level possible. Everything from the Old Fashioned Festival to Easter egg hunt, pancake breakfast, in addition to all the new training that we're bringing into town. One example being hands-only CPR, where we've already began partnerships with George Fox, and we've been inside the middle schools providing the hands-only training to those students as well. One final thing that I'd like to speak to, and that's the Insurance Service Office rating, ISO rating, that is currently here in the city is a 3, and either an 8, 9, or a 10 outside of the city. TVF&R has a rating within our urban core of a 2 and a 3 outside of the cities. And should the annexation go through, then Newberg would assume those new ratings, which for those insurance companies that use ISO for their rating and to set their fire service or fire insurance rates, people that have those companies have the possibility of seeing a reduction in their fire insurance premiums. And with that, I think I will turn it over to Stephen Myers to talk about the public outreach options.
Well, I'm going to jump in. This is Les Hallman again before we turn it over to Stephen. Under the terms of the contract that you have in place with TVF&R, there's a critical deadline that you're aware of that's fast approaching. By July 1st, the Newberg City Council and the TVF&R Board of Directors must decide if moving forward to a permanent relationship is in the best interest of both parties. When the contract was signed last year, no in-depth research had been conducted into Oregon law on how the permanent relationship would be achieved. It was a general belief that it would require a ballot measure and a vote of your electorate. Since then, the TVF&R legal counsel and your city attorney have looked into the laws more closely, and they have discovered a permanent relationship would require TVF&R to annex the city of Newberg into their fire district. Unfortunately, Oregon laws on annexations are written more around county and city annexations and not annexations for fire districts. They are very difficult to navigate and they are very difficult to understand. And that's probably an understatement. It's been discovered under Oregon law, wrong state. It's been discovered that under Oregon law, I just reverted, didn't I? For TVF&R to annex into the city of Newberg, into its fire district, it actually requires city council action and not a ballot measure. We know that's different than what we all initially thought, and we're here tonight to assure you that TVF&R is dedicated to working hand in hand with the city and your council in a very open and public process to raise community awareness on this issue and provide you with community input leading up to your council decision. Before we talk about that process, I would like to ask your city attorney, Mr. Mayor, if you allow Truman Stone to provide you with the legal background that led to that conclusion that an annexation by TVF&R would require city council action.
Do you want to do that before or after
It's up to you.
firefighter Myers? You want to do it now? All right, go ahead. Please identify yourself.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Truman Stone, your city attorney. I prepared a document that I've given you a copy. There's copies at the back table for the public if you haven't picked one up. It's looks like this. It's titled Frequently Asked Legal Questions Regarding the Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue Annexation. And so on this paper, I have some of the questions that people have been asking and some of the answers to those questions. And I've included on the sheet on the bottom of the backside on page 2 the Oregon revised statute that's applicable to annexation of a city into a special district. And a fire district is just one of the types of special districts. It's ORS 198866. And the process is that the governing body of the city adopts a resolution or motion to propose annexation and transfers that to the district. Then the district board considers that application and makes a decision whether to approve or disapprove the annexation proposal. The district board then has the requirement of conducting an election unless there's an exemption to the election requirement. So the exemptions are, there's one that's applicable to the city, and that is if the population of the city is less than 20% of the population of the district, then an election is not required. And the population of Newberg is roughly 24,000. Population of the Tualatin Valley Fire District, from the information on their website, is about 450,000. Is that correct? Which puts Newberg at about 5% of the district population. So that would be an exception. So under that provision in the statute, there would be no election within the city on annexation. It's an action by the council and then a consideration of that action by the Tualatin Valley Board, either to accept the proposal or disapprove the proposal. Now, I want to be clear, this is simply talking about the city annexing into the district. This is not the Newberg Rural Fire Protection District, which is a special district in and of itself, and the statutes that are applicable to those districts are completely different than the statute that's applicable for a city annexing into a district. My understanding is there would need to be a vote in the rural district because you have two fire districts coming together in some mechanism. And again, that's covered by a completely different statute than what the statute applicable to the city is. And so that's what I had to say about this. And if we run out back there, I can make additional copies for folks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And now we'll turn it over to Stephen Myers, our Public Affairs Officer.
Okay. Mayor, City Council, and City staff, my name is Stephen Myers. I'm a Public Affairs Officer with Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue. I'm excited to talk to you about something that I'm passionate about, which is community involvement. That's what I do a lot for with the fire department. As Mr. Stone just outlined, the applicable statutes show that if decided upon, the mechanism for annexation would be a council action. Given that information, I'm here to let you know that TVF&R is prepared to support a robust outreach campaign that would both quantitatively and qualitatively gauge community awareness and opinion and thus better inform the council's decision. We believe that this process would allow the community to have input on the level of service they prefer and the future of fire and emergency medical service in their community. To obtain this information, TVF&R, along with both public and private institutions, have relied for decades on proven researchers like Campbell and DeLong, who are here with us today. And I want to be clear, their objective is to inform, not to influence. They help Martha and John, who are here this evening, will be explaining that process more, but they're there to get information so that decision makers can make better informed decisions and make better use of city or governmental resources. So what I want to do, though, first is take a step back before I talk about what that outreach process would look like. And again, tell you about some stuff I'm passionate about. I've had a lot of coffee in this town, and that's been a result of our community outreach we've done so far. As Chief Sherrard shared, whether it's involvement with the Old Fashioned Festival, Pancake Breakfast, wonderful program Toy and Joy, we've been really excited to continue those programs and have opportunities to have discussions with the community. honestly, again, with all the coffee I've been having, people were, trepidatious about this at the beginning. It's a new provider of service in the area. The department that's been here has a wonderful reputation and history, and so they had a lot of questions. And so I've seen through meeting with people a great movement from that, trepidation to building of trust. And I think we've earned that from one-to-one opportunities to show that we really care about that small town feel and involvement with the community. As he also outlined, we've been able to add new initiatives. We're doing CPR at the schools now. We've been able to partner with the nursing students at George Fox University and teach other students a life-saving skill, as well as Pulse Point, and as you may have seen recently in the paper, in the Newberg graphic, a verified responder program, all of which are great new programs that are in the community and really engage the community in the safety of their fellow neighbors. Again, I've had the honor of getting to work with former fire chiefs, the firefighters here, volunteers, and do presentations at community groups, Rotary, Kiwanis, and anyone really that'll have me, to talk about who TVF&R is and the process that's taking place right now. All of this has helped build that perspective and some of that community trust that I was explaining. But that's just to outline that some of the outreach that we've already done to engage the community. Now, in the coming months, as we said with the mechanism that Mr. Stone outlined, we would like to suggest a robust community outreach process that would involve the citizenry in sharing their opinion. That would look like, just to do a quick overview, but Martha and John will explain more, focus groups. It involved public attitude survey, direct mails that would be informative to the voters, as well as town halls. We think this would be an inclusive process that would help both TVF&R receive feedback as well as city leadership. And as we have talked in the past, you've got a general outline of what that would look like, but I'll let them explain more. So, thank you.
At this time, Mr. Mayor, we'd like to bring up Campbell and DeLong.
You may.
Good evening.
You've done this before, so
Yeah.
you know the drill. Please
Yeah.
identify yourself.
Yeah, I'm John Campbell with Campbell DeLong Resources,
And I'm Martha DeLong with Campbell DeLong Resources.
and we're here to talk with you just a little bit, to give you some information about our background and talk with you briefly about the research side of the public engagement process, because you can think of public engagement as really having two elements. One is you're going to hold community meetings, you're going to generally collect feedback from anyone who wants to come to the meetings in a variety of different ways from that standpoint. The other process is, from a research standpoint, we will document from a using scientific methodology to give you an idea of proportion, how big, how wide, what the general tenor is of the community. So with not simply those who are involved, but the whole community from that standpoint. And as very involved folks, we know that's a thing that matters in two different ways. Just briefly, so you have just some idea about who we are. Our website's at cdri.com. You can see a bunch of our background there. But in brief, Martha and I have been doing market research since the 1980s. We have done research all over North America and many areas in Europe. We have worked with many different, began focusing with high technology companies and a lot in the private sector through much of the 80s and a lot of the 90s, and still work with many private sector companies, and began to pivot in the 90s towards working more and more with public sector companies and having to learn all the vagaries and the differences between the private and public sector, and merging some of that learning when you're talking about what voters think versus what community members think versus what consumers think, and some of those different issues. In each of those venues, our number one mission has always been to come back with the most honest, direct information we can about what's being heard, because whether you're talking about a large private organization, you're talking about a governmental agency, you're talking about whatever the issue is, we internally start to develop a certain language. And when we go outside and start to hear from people, we can hear some new things that can be very informative. So sometimes we come back with good news and sometimes we don't, but we always come back with the news that we're finding as clearly as possible. But we have done quite a range of types of surveys and specialized certainly with a lot of public safety agencies and in the last 15 years, a lot of different fire districts around the Northwest we have worked with as well. Very briefly, I'm going to describe just sort of a very typical process, and then Martha will talk about the specifics of what it is that we would be doing here. Generically, with any research process, what we start with, in this case, be meeting with staff and learning about issues and dynamics so that we are as well informed as possible about the decisions, the trade-offs, the different options that could be talked with the community. And through that process, it's sort of we are mixing our research expertise with your knowledge expertise, essentially. And we take that information, and step one in this case, we think there's enough of a sort of range of questions of helping understand it and some of that it makes sense to inform the survey process where we get to survey the larger community and measure the opinions. But we think that generically starting with focus groups and just hearing enough so that we can inform that process. It's not perfect, it doesn't tell us everything, but it helps us with some good answers. And it's a process we use very typically to hear and understand well enough so that we've got learning not just from staff but from scientifically selected community members before we go to the expense and process of doing a very thorough research process. You can't ask very complicated questions over the phones, but if you learn how to ask the questions correctly, you can ask questions that tell you a lot over the phone. And that type of process we've used in many, many different types of elements. And Martha can tell you about how we're going to apply that here.
Okay. Before I get started, does anybody have any questions? All right. So we'll.
You want to introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Martha DeLong with
Did
Campbell
earlier?
DeLong.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. I missed it. My
Oh,
apologies.
that's okay.
Thank you, Stephen.
No problem. I want to talk first about the focus groups because that's the first step in this two-step process. Basically, what we're doing with the focus group in this case is getting together a cross-section of community members. We're suggesting holding two groups in two different locations in Newberg. And the criteria for who we invite will be relatively simple, but it's very important that we follow it. Certainly, they need to live within the city limits of Newberg. We will set a quota to make sure we have a good age range, that we don't end up with, for some reason, all older or all younger participants. And we will set quotas to ensure we are representing all parts of Newberg, so that all sections of the town are included. We also typically do a 50-50 male-female split. We locate these people by calling into homes and putting them through a very simple set of questions to make sure we're getting that diversity and that people are qualified and that we have all sections of the towns and all ages represented. We would then hold the groups, typically in an evening, sometimes on a Saturday, so that people can come. And we usually do it in this case, in a library. If there's a library conference room, we audio and videotape all the groups so that you will be able to review the DVDs and see and experience the group. It's also possible, we haven't really decided, if there are members of the city council that want to watch them live, we can set up a closed circuit TV setup so that you could watch it live. The advantage of that is that it really does make it more real, I think, to people than watching on a DVD. But also you could send in notes if something came up that you said, gee, I really wish you would ask this question. And ideally, moments later, we would ask that question. But if that doesn't happen, you would be able to send us in notes. So we'd really recommend that if that is possible. Let's see, the group's about 90 minutes long, much longer than you can do in a telephone survey. That gives us a good amount of time to really delve into the questions. The moderator would most likely be myself. It might be John, depending on schedules. We've done a lot of these, and one of the advantages of that is that if we will have a discussion guide that's probably 10, 12 pages long, but if something comes up that needs to be probed more completely, we can do that. We don't have to follow the script, although we do relatively closely. Let's see. So we will write the screener that's used to find the people. That'll be approved by city staff and TVF&R to make sure that we're doing it to your wishes. And then we would write the discussion guide, and that'll be very important to make sure that we're covering all the question areas and looking at all the options. We, in this case, will write a memo summarizing the findings, but we will also, because of time frame, going immediately into the design of the survey, the telephone survey that would take place immediately after. Any questions on the focus groups before we move on to the survey? All right. Well, the focus groups will give us a really good idea of the range of opinions that are out there, the types of answers, how people feel. But what we want to be able to do is quantify that information. And so we'll do a telephone survey, calling, in this case, somewhere between 200 and 300 people. We haven't really settled on the sample size at this point. We'll set a couple of quotas to make sure we have good representation. Excuse me. One would be for cell phones, because we know many people, particularly younger people and low-income people, only have cell phones, and we want to make sure we have a good representation of that. It is also possible that we would set a quota for Latinos, because they're often underrepresented in these types of research processes, and if we set a quota, then we'll make sure that they have adequate representation. Oops. You're so
keep talking,
helpful.
I'll turn
All
the
right.
pages. There we go.
All right. What we would, our sampling approach, we would start with a list of registered voters. The advantage of that is that they have cell phones on there, and that's the least expensive way of making sure that we meet that cell phone quota. So we start with that list, but we probably will have to supplement that in order to get the quota of Latinos if we settle on one of those. Criteria, people would have to be 18 years of age or older. We're assuming they would also have to be a registered voter, and they'd have to live in the city. And we do a 50-50 male-female split. Some of the questions that we would be asking, the general question areas, we would ask aided and unaided awareness of who is providing their fire and medical response. So we'll see, do they even know that the switch has been made? Do they think the city of Newberg is still doing it? Their level of support for annexation, we would look at that and see what they think. And then we'd read them a series of facts that reflect statements that reflect facts and benefits of what the annexation would bring to the city, and determine how useful that information is to them. We'd look at their contact with fire and emergency medical response in the last year and ask some demographic questions. Those are the general areas. We anticipate that it'll probably be about a 12-minute survey. When I first started doing this, you could actually keep people on the phone for like 25 minutes, half an hour. It was pretty amazing. It doesn't happen anymore that way. We write, we think, particularly when we're doing the process where we're doing the focus groups and then we're writing the questionnaire, we write surveys so that people stay engaged, that the questions make sense to them because we've listened to them in the focus groups. So we don't have problems keeping people on the phone, but more than 12 minutes is really asking too much of people today.
And I think I would add that another question area that may well come up is if in the focus group we discover that there is a lot of issue around, say, two different options or two different issues, that type of thing, whatever those issues are. We could also use that to inform a question that was simple enough to write. Because when you're on the phone, you don't want to get in a long discussion with people. Say, what do you think? Well, I don't know. What do you think? You need to say, if you had to choose between option A and option B, or how would you rate the value of these or that kind of thing? So you need to have them fairly compact so we can quantify it. So there may be issues that we simply don't know and cannot predict right now that may come out of the focus groups, that we realize that we come out of that with a strong recommendation saying, we want to ask some questions around these issues about whether or not if this were true, it's beneficial, if that's true, it isn't, so that it can help inform your decisions, understanding these are the things that our community has been saying, and some of that, it doesn't take place of the decision making, but it can help inform that significantly.
After we finish our data collection, we will do the data processing. We'll create a printout so that we can look at the responses of different groups, for example, males or females, different parts of town, different age groups, and we can see how they are similar and how they are different, if there are any significant differences. And we'll write up a complete report. We will present that report both to the staff and we assume to you. And that provides you with the opportunity to talk to us about it, talk about the findings, what we think it means.
And I do want to emphasize a point, we began with a point and finished with a point, that what we're talking about is the research process associated with that. And that's different from a public meeting, for example, and forums, and there are many other ways that we understand you will be collecting information, and all of those bring in voices from all different processes. Our process is designed to provide the science that tells us how big, how wide, what is the measure of a community, and some of that. So we'll have some statistically projectable data for that. But again, it's just we also we do more than research. I teach a course on community organizing, for example, and as someone who knows about many of these issues, I wouldn't want at all to represent what we're doing as anything more than a part of that process, because forums and listening and many other procedures that you all well know are also critical to that. So we think this is a critical part, but we also want to emphasize that it is a part of it. Questions?
So, questions?
Well, thanks for me to ask, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Any questions or comments from the staff? I have a couple, if I may. And I'll start, and then those that may have some other. You mentioned that you had done this with other fire districts or cities in the area or in the region. Can you identify those, please?
Sure. Go. I'll let you feel that.
We do quite a bit of work with Washington County. We've done work with the city of Beaverton. We've done work with the city of Lake Oswego. We've done work with city of Gresham, city of Portland.
You're also asking about fire districts specifically. So I think you were asking about, for example,
Well,
Oregon
you were
City.
talking about doing this type of thing with
Yeah.
other fire districts.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
that's,
So-
okay, you want fire districts?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say.
Sorry. All right. Other fire districts other than TVF&R, we've done it with city of Redmond, with the city of Oregon
Specifically
City.
looking at an annexation
Annexation
issue.
area, we're specifically annexation, Oregon City, we were looking at annexations. I have to say, we've probably done more on bonds and levies. We've just recently did Southwest Polk.
We've worked with Medford,
Medford,
Fire
Spokane,
District 8. We've
Missoula.
worked with Montana, Washington,
Montana.
Oregon, but
thank you.
I have to get a list. But
Well, that gives me an idea. You mentioned that in these, as you're working with these focus groups or working with these small groups, as you were talking about this, trying to clear up some of the facts about the value of the annexation.
Right.
Are you also dealing with facts that deal with no annexation?
Oh, yes.
Sure.
Thank
yes.
you. I wanted to make sure that
Yeah,
was,
no, that's-
absolutely.
there's
Yeah.
both sides of the question.
Oh, yeah, no,
Oh.
no. We start with a group on a very open basis, finding out what they know about fire and rescue services, how they would solve this problem if this problem was simply up to them, moving on to options and letting them provide us with their response to which option they think is best for the city.
And
Thank you.
let me just say, we are not here to sell the idea. We're here, in fact, if they get enthusiastic, we will switch to doing what we call the devil's advocate questions and saying, what about, we've heard people somewhere say X kind of thing, and see, sort of to push them a bit and see how strongly they feel. So even if they try to sell us, well, we do that back and forth, because we're not here to advocate one position or another.
Thank you.
We really want to get you the truth.
Councilor Essen?
Yes, I've been on council about 2 years, and 2 years ago I met with Jackie Betts and Les Hallman, and we talked about this issue. And Les told me that basically we're running on fumes, and he's doing his best to keep us safe. But as you just said, if we bring on somebody that actually fully staffs the fire stations, we will have a decrease in our fire insurance, which tells me there's some perception that we will be better protected. My question on that is some of the options, we then met and came up with different options as to how we could go. And one of those options was to hook up with McMinnville.
Excuse me, is this a question for
Well, let me get to
our
it.
two consultants?
Yeah, I'm just gonna.
Okay, go ahead.
So that was my question. Not only will we have the no option, but will we pursue other options other than the no option? Now, as I recall, this was the best option. But you don't necessarily mean that when you answered the mayor's question that basically there isn't, people don't know all the different offers that were available. So basically, how is that pursued? I guess that's my question. To make sure that, like for instance, we have the undivided attention of the Taxpayers Association. So the question may not be, do you want to have your taxes raised, or do you want to have somebody come when you dial 911 and you have a heart attack? So how is that identified?
On the one hand, I mean, if you were secretly planning to merge with Eugene for some reason and we didn't know about it, we're probably not going to ask about it. But on the other hand, all of this is about trade-offs, right? You don't just ask, do you want your taxes to go up or down? Here are the trade-offs and some of that, and educating people about that and how some of that works. But some of what you're asking has to do with making sure we have some of the expertise that you have. So we'll be talking with staff about what are all the options, and we'll even just push them for, tell us every option that's been talked about, because if they're really going in one direction, we want to know what other thoughts have come up as you do that. But if there's some option that nobody ever tells us about, it may be, unless somebody raises it, we may not know that. But we really want to make sure that, if you will, we're sort of mentally programmed to know as many different options and approaches and issues and trade-offs as we can. I mean, we can already tell you basic things for free, which is that people are skeptical about government, so they want to know what you're doing, and various types of things. But we want to go lower or deeper than that. Lower is probably the wrong term, but deeper than that. And so we want to learn about those trade-offs. So, but it is possible. Yes, it's learning for us to know that talking about a merger with McMinnville could be a potential as well. So.
Councilor Johnson?
Hi, good evening. Thanks for coming out. I have a couple, Mayor, if that's all right. About how long does your process take to run, I'm guessing, 2 focus groups?
2 focus groups, typically 5 to 6 weeks to do 2 focus groups.
And then
As fast as possible with this in this instance.
In this instance, yeah.
Okay. And my second question is, I have the timeline that was given to us back in February. We're already about 12 days past the first focus
Right,
group
yes.
date on there.
Yeah.
The mayor mentioned tonight that we're thinking about something maybe late April. I'm just a little concerned about the timelines. And
We're
could you
actually,
speak to that a little?
I put together a timeline.
Okay.
And what we hope to do is have some direction this evening, and we would get going right away, and we would hope to conduct the focus groups the week of April 17th. and that then we would be doing the interviewing for the community survey the week of May 17th for about 10 days, and we would have the results for you the week of June 5th. But we need to get going immediately in order to meet that timeline.
And yes, that is fast.
Yeah.
I'm good. I think that's all I have for them.
Any other questions at this time for the consultant? Thank you. Appreciate it very much. Mr. Hallman?
Les Hallman, Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue, and Brian Sherrard, Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue. Mr. Mayor, City
He's gonna
Council.
speak for himself, all right?
Sir?
He's never.
Yeah, I know. Mr. Mayor, City Council, you've been presented a lot of information tonight, and we thank you for your time and your patience. As you've heard, there's a lot of work to be done in order for you to reach an informed decision and meet the July 1 deadline, which is required by the contract. TVF&R is ready to move forward with the Campbell DeLong Public Attitude Research to provide you with community input for your decision. We would like to work with you and city staff on what you need to know from the community to reach your decision. That information has to be finalized to us by April 13th to stay on track with the tight deadlines. I believe in your packet you got the updated deadlines. Mr. Mayor, I hope all of you have that, the new timelines. Please be thinking, each of you, what you need to know from the community, especially that revolve around funding if a TVF&R annexation should occur. And Mr. Mayor, due to our tight timeline, unless you or the council feels different, we will have Campbell and DeLong begin work right away. And with that, we thank you again for your time, and Chief Sherrard and I are here for your questions, Mr. Mayor.
Any questions? Yes. Did you have, yes, go ahead.
So, I have a number of questions, Mr. Mayor, if that's all right.
TVF&R?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Again, good evening. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for placating some of the newer members on the council who haven't gone through the entire process. I appreciate that. I'm just curious. I know Chief Holloman and I met and discussed some of the things, so you're going to hear some of these questions you've heard before. So I mostly just want to let people know in the audience kind of what we covered and some of the answers you gave. So first off is I am aware that we have use of newer equipment and more people on staff, but are there plans to close any fire stations in Newberg or the surrounding area?
No, sir, absolutely not.
Okay, and what would be your plans for current equipment and different facilities around the area were you to annex in?
Where the two stations are located right now currently work very well for response times. Everything that TVF&R does is based on analysis. We're always looking at response times and coverage areas. So we've already done a quick overview of the city. We've done a quick overview of the current responses that the city's going to, and the two stations where they are located work well. So there are no immediate plans to change the locations of the two stations, number one. Number two, as you're aware, I know you're new on the council, but the other council members are aware, our equipment was beginning to struggle. And already TVF&R has brought new equipment into the city of Newberg and placed it in service. And we will just continue to do that. TVF&R will become City of Newberg will become part of the whole Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue district, and they have a very good equipment replacement program. So you'll see they're always using up-to-date equipment.
Thank you. And I'm concerned about the cost of service when the city had fire to TVF&R in its own rate and how all that works. Because I've heard a lot of different information about different rates for different communities inside TVF&R, and I was curious, can you kind of walk me through how that works?
As far as the TVF&R taxing?
Yeah.
So right now, TVF&R has a tax that's overlaid across the entire district. Every taxpayer in Tualatin Valley's fire district pays the same tax rate. There is no difference rate based on the area. And that same thing would apply with the city of Newberg. If we annex the city of Newberg in, the TVF&R tax rate would be overlaid across the city of Newberg. The total tax rate going into fiscal year 17-18 is at $2.08. And that $2.08 includes a permanent rate of 1.5252, a local option levy of 0.45, and in last year, a general obligation bond of 0.1326. You will notice if you look at the past few years' history of TVF&R's rate, it keeps going down each year, a couple pennies, and that's because the general obligation bond, TVF&R is very aggressive at renegotiating their obligation bonds and getting that rate down and to benefit the taxpayers. So each year, we try to lower that, so it fluctuates a little bit, but it's all based on that general obligation bond.
Okay, great. And as you know, in the age of compression and property taxes, how well do you play with others? How well do you, I know that certain agencies talk to each other in communities and say, hey, look, we need a pool. We want to go out for a pool. We want to stay away from compression. And as a city, we want to be responsible with taxpayers' bills. Do you regularly meet with the school districts and the cities in your area to kind of discuss those financial impacts they could have?
I think, Counselor, probably one of the best ways I can answer that question, and the mayor will remember this discussion with our fire chief, Chief Dyke. And Chief Dyke looked the mayor square in the eye and said, I challenge you to call every elected official that does any type of work with Tualatin Valley Fire Rescue, call every city manager, call every mayor, and ask them what they think of Tualatin Valley Fire Rescue. And I think to this day, Mayor, I don't want to put words in your mouth, you've not found anyone who's been displeased with our services or how we cooperate and work with them. I'll let him correct me if I'm wrong. Yes, he would.
One of the other things that I was curious about, and you just answered that one, so thank you. One of the concerns I have, and this is just from tonight, and looking at the timelines and kind of being surprised with the no vote news that we got a few weeks ago, is that it just feels to me like this has been put in place and now, oh, well, we don't need a vote. And, oh, well, now we're behind on the timeline and we need to hurry up with the consultants. And I guess what I'm looking for from you is, I know this is a partnership, and on the city side, we need to kind of manage timelines and manage the project, but I would also expect that you guys would do the same on your end. Going forward, I mean, this is what I think some of the public outcry we've heard, or some of the public input we've heard, has been simply because this is a surprise. And people don't react well to surprises, especially when it has to do with their taxes. And so I guess my question to you would be, going forward, how aggressive are you guys going to be on this timeline if we continue to move forward with this?
Well, we're both obligated, TVF&R as well as City of Newberg, to make a decision by July 1. We've been on that timeline from the day the contract was signed. The Intergovernmental Council meets quarterly, and we've had those discussions in those meetings. We know that we got to keep moving to make that July 1 timeline. And people may ask, why is that July 1 timeline so important? Is because if we reach July 1 and the decision is made that TVF&R is not the answer, it will literally take an entire year to uncouple and unbuild everything that's been built up to this point. You can't put together what we've put together overnight, nor can you take it apart. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Councilor Edison?
Yes, as I understand it, the rate will be at 210.
Yes, sir.
And as I recall, our fire department was probably about $1.40.
No, sir.
What was it?
We
We will cover that.
Okay, good. So there's going to be a difference between, I don't think we're at 210. So for people that are wondering, how much can we reduce our taxes if this were to pass, it's not 210 because we aren't spending 210 now. What we're doing is we're spending some extra money to get it. All this extra personnel is not free. All this, now that's number one. Number two, as far as the 2 fire stations, I heard you say we'd have no intention to not having the 2 fire stations. The fire station to the east by the hospital is on one end of town. The other one's on the other end of town, which means that if I have a heart attack and that east fire station were to go down, you guys were to take it out of service, then the one at the other end of town would be jumping on, if I had my heart attack at 4 o'clock, would be jumping on 99 and it's fully plugged. So that's a concern that I've heard from my neighbors, is we want to make sure that we get the same level of service as far as the way it is now. So, because we've got the hospital, all the old folks, everything down there that are constantly needing attention. So just to let you know, that's some of my neighbors' concerns about how this might go.
And then also, they wanted a little explanation over why.
We would be spending more than we're spending now if we had kept it. And the reason, and then the other question I have, the third question is, if the choice were to say, okay, then we want to take it back, we're not going to go forward with this, is there any concept of what that would cost? Would that, what I've heard it would be in the millions to try to get this remand and to get all of our fire equipment up. So that might be a good piece of information for people to say, well, we don't want to go forward with this, if they were to know that what we currently have is totally underfunded and we're at a capped tax rate. So somehow that, I'm asking if that's going to be covered.
So Councilor Essen, I think probably some of the best ways I can answer is, first, let's talk about what it was costing the city of Newberg. Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue agreed to work with the city of Newberg. The current contract is costing the city of Newberg the same it was already costing. So keep that in mind. So the city of Newberg right now is paying the same amount of money it was already paying for fire and EMS service.
About 60 or something.
TVF&R came in July 1 of last year and immediately increased our staffing to 2 3-man engines 24 hours a day. At the city's current funding rate, it probably would have taken the city close to 10 to 15 years to reach that level of service, number one. Number two, June 1st, we're now adding a 4th firefighter to both stations, which will literally increase the staffing in Newberg 100%. It will double the amount of staffing the city of Newberg had prior to this contract. I'll have to let your finance director answer your question about what's the difference in the rate, but I will tell you, you're going to be surprised, to double your staff, it doesn't cost a whole lot more than it was prior what the city was paying. The reason Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue can do that is exactly why TVF&R is so successful. It is a regionalized approach to fire and EMS delivery. We're in 4 counties and in 12 cities and servicing almost 500,000 people. So when you take the Tualatin Valley tax rate and expand that over that area, you have the benefit of economy of scale, and you're able to provide a higher level of service at a lesser amount. If the city of Newberg tried to match that same level of service, it would cost a whole lot more than $2.10.
Well, that's the reasoning I think you gave me when we were talking about whether we should do this or not. But
Yes,
I
sir.
want to make sure other people were aware that reasoning was put in place by you, who was our fire chief at the time, and you were trying to figure out a way to make it work. And it's going to cost more, but from what it looks like, we're going to get double the coverage for, I don't know what the difference is, but it's not double the cost. I know that.
Clarification in this discussion that I was hearing.
Yes, sir.
There's no intent, or did I misunderstand you? There's no intent of closing down either Station 20 or 21.
No, sir, and I
Thank you.
forgot
That's-
to.
don't go any further.
Okay, I forgot to write that down, but no,
Yeah,
sir,
there's
we
no
will
intent of
continue
closing it.
operating like we are.
Thank you, I
Okay.
appreciate that very much. Councilor McKinney?
We are not at 210, we're at 208.
Yes, sir. That will be the rate TVF&R charges in fiscal year 17-18 is 208.
I leaned over and asked the mayor, are we at our limit? Are we at compression? And the answer is no. There's room.
Right.
Without creating burdens. And of course, I wanted to also reiterate this conversation about the closing of 21. I first heard from citizens and asked Captain Haven about, or whatever, so that that misinformation about Station 20 1 is put to bed. We are not at compression, and our rate is at 208, not 210.
That would be the TVF&R rate. Yeah. Thank you, not our rate. Any other questions at this time for TVF&R? Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Don't run away.
Oh, okay.
All right. No. Just remain available.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm going to call on Matt Zook to give us an update on the financial analysis, if you would, together with our city manager. Nothing about the top billing that I gave. Is there any inference in the top billing there?
He's top.
Please identify yourself.
Matt Zook, Finance Director. Thank you, Mayor and Council. And there are handouts in the back of the analysis that I prepared for this evening. Essentially, in working with Manager Hannon, we answered a couple questions as to what the city was paying in 2015-16, as well as what it's paying in 2016-17. We took a look at the actual expenditures, translated that into a tax rate, and then also analyzed what it would cost to the average assessed value on the average home. And this information is all supported by information from our budget and the Yamhill County Assessor's Office. So you have this analysis in front of you, and essentially, like I said, we took the expenditures from 15-16, and these are, in 15-16, you'll recall that we actually had the fire department here. We had firefighters on our staff as employees, as well as their materials and services and any capital outlay. The analysis that I did, I need to clarify, that was the general fund, and because that is funded by the tax levy, the city's general property tax levy. So in 15-16, the total net cost $3,060,000, and that would translate into a net cost of $1.81, which would be an average cost of $340 per average assessed value. The average assessed value is detailed on the bottom of the page, and this information is all, like I said, at the assessor's office. We took the average sales price and basically of $244,000, and then you'll recall that the assessed value is typically lower, and in this case, in 15-16, it was about 23% lower than the real market value. So the average assessed value for Newberg homes is about $187,000. And so for the average taxpayer, it would cost $340 to provide the fire service as under the old model. In 15-16, oh, sure. Any questions on that so far? Okay. The analysis below, well, let me move over to the 2016-17, and we provide the same information, although this model is revealing the contract with TVF&R. And again, this portion of the contract payment is equivalent to what the general fund would pay. So the net cost to the to TVF&R out of the general fund would be $3,379,000 roughly, and that translates into approximately $1.90 as a rate, or $3.97 to the average assessed value. Right below that, any questions on that? Okay. Right below that section, under where it says Newberg permanent tax rate, you'll see that our permanent tax rate is $4.38 per thousand. And you can see that that levied about $7,435,000 in 2015-16 and $7.8 million in 2016-17. if the city was to reduce its tax rate for the amount that the cost of the fire department, the net levy would be $4,300,000, or a tax rate of $2.57 per thousand, and that's in 15-16. And then the same analysis was repeated for 2016-17. And then below that I have essentially an analysis on the TVF&R rate, which Les Holman mentioned, 2015-16, $2.10. We're off by a penny. I'll take it out of his wallet next at the end of the meeting. $2.09 for 2016-17. And so then the combined rate, the combined rate between the two would be $4.68. If you were to subtract the Newberg permanent tax rate of $4.38, the net difference would be 29 cents per thousand. And again, over in 2016-17, the net difference would be 19 cents per thousand. Does that make sense so far?
Councilor Essen?
So this would be the amount less the tax rate that we'd be paying to TVF&R?
It's your choice, so it's Joe Hannon, your city manager. So your choice is there of what you do with the tax rate. What we got asked a lot on the emails and every place else is, how much does it cost to provide the fire service? So we translated the amount that it cost us, and this is actual, as opposed to budgeted, so that's important. But what's the actual cost? And we translated it as if it was paid all from property tax. Of course, unlike any kind of a special district, you receive money from a lot of different sources. Some is property tax, some is taxes that come from franchise and all that. But if you were just translated, that would be the amount. You have the authority from year to year of how much you tax the residents, all of us, up to a certain dollar amount. So if you took the amount that it cost us in either one of those 2-year budgets and reduced the amount that you would levy, that's where that comes out. But you have your choice of any amounts that are in there. You could keep the whole amount of money if you wish to also.
So when my neighbor sent me the flyer and wanted to know what the hell was going on, what was going on is the Taxpayers Association was assuming that we weren't going to reduce anything, even though it's possible that we could reduce the entire amount and there wouldn't be any additional tax at all.
Right, it took the case where you were taking no action to reduce it on their flyer. Another one that's kind of important on those, if you haven't been following, particularly since we have the rural fire here, we're in partnership with the rural fire district now. And what you've seen there is money in and money out. So it's a wash that the money that the rural fire district gives us for service is actually provided by TVF&R. So the money we get from them, we pass that along. And that's why on the analysis you see it's the exact same amount of money as going forward.
So what essentially happen is, when we make the deal, make the change, when they take it over, they charge directly for the service. We no longer are pass through. Is that correct?
At that point, it'd be between those two districts. That's why you heard the city attorney was talking about if they dissolve as a district, then they become part of TVF&R. We're completely out of that. If they don't dissolve, then they have to go. So if we no longer have the fire service, then they look for other options to provide their service, which could be going back to TVF&R, but that's clearly the rural fire district.
Not ours.
Counselor Johnson.
Good evening. Thanks, Matt, for the analysis. It makes sense to me, and I appreciate the information. I just wanted to clarify that we also last summer reduced the rate on the municipal service statement by $1.50 a month. Is that correct? So for the past almost year now, we actually have charged folks a little less than what we did before we went to TVF&R. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I would love to see an analysis with that added in here to see what that would do to the cost, because right now it looks like it's a $42 a year difference. Is that safe to say if we switch?
On average.
On the average house, sorry, thank you. And I'd like to see what that number would be if we took that $1.50 off the municipal service statement and added that in annually and see what that would come to, because that's a cost too.
Follow on?
Matt, your figures provided here to us tonight are actuals. The $1.50's already been removed, correct?
That's correct.
All right. So, in terms of the actuals, I'm looking at a in the second column from the right, in differences, this level of coverage that TVF&R has been able to provide for us is at 19 cents, 19.78 cents per thousand. Is that correct?
That's dangerous to look that way, because they're providing under a contract. Whatever it would cost, they've already agreed to a contract.
Yep.
That would be different, or that will be different from the next year, and they say across their entire district that it's $2.10 for whatever that cost is. So, one is what we were asked to do.
May I interrupt?
Yeah.
We're hearing different figures.
Okay.
Is it $2.10? Is it $1.90? Or is it 2.08? Or is it 2.09?
No. What we're saying, that it costs the city of Newberg, not what it costs TVF&R, because they could spend many millions more than this, but it's what does it cost us? In 2015-16 was our actual cost of the people on the ground, firefighters. That's the cost, where if you translated it into property tax, and that's what's on the sheet there, that it cost us, $1.81 if you translate the property tax. This year, what we're paying for is a contract, okay? We're not saying, well, it's this much for, personnel and equipment and fuel and that. We're saying, this is the contract that we negotiated, and that is $1.90. So that's when people say.
That gives us fire service.
Yes, it gives us fire service. So people have asked, how much does it cost you? Those are the two numbers. 15-16, it cost us $1.81, and this year it cost us $1.90 under the contract.
$1.81, $1.90, a difference of 11 cents.
From 2 years, 9 cents, right?
And that's actual.
Yes, actual.
So the figure that the public's been hearing is $4.38, $4.37. How erroneous is that figure?
It's not erroneous, it's just not describing fire. The $4.30 is for everything that the city pays for all the services, including the police department. So it was just shown there as the total amount the city. That's accurate. It's just that's not the amount of money we pay for fire. Fire can be translated as included in that.
Follow on. So the actual question related in most of our meetings said, how much more is it going to be, and what kind of bang am I going to get for my buck? It's looking like, Patrick, you can explain to me, for the cost in your research of about $20 more per year, $25, $24, if we proceed with the annexation, is what using TVF&R will be if we approve the annexation. $24 more per household in the average year, average house. See, that's bringing it down to how much is it going to cost me? And what's the bang for the buck? Can't go backwards, couldn't reconstitute a fire department without investment of millions of dollars to make up for personnel. Oh, and then by the way, you got to send that personnel out in some type of apparatus, so, how you deal with that. I guess is what's been exasperating to me, Joe, is that how much more is it really going to be in actual dollars? And what is the biggest bang for the buck if it's only going to be $24 a year for the average household in terms of assessed value? And I mean, how much money am I really going to get taxed for in that year?
So, so both Councilor McKinney and Councilor Johnson, what Councilor Johnson asked us is, we have reduced it. So it's, yes, there's a reduction of $1.50. So if you were taking last year, actually when it came in, that reduction has already been made. So it's accurate to say $42 would be the increase, we believe. But you've already made the change
You already
there.
put that in
Yeah,
place.
so
Okay.
you're not gonna see that 42 reduced by the other $1.50. Now, that being said, also, you do have a record here. So what you heard tonight, we didn't put it on here, and our next version will put this, but you heard that the tax rate of the fire district is made up of a permanent rate, like the city is. That's permanent. It stays there. And then there is a bond rate. And as, like any bonds, as the bonds go down, the price goes down. So worst case scenario, if you want to say that, or the highest, is what we're showing here at 210. But, and it's only slightly, but as you see on this sheet, and what you heard tonight is that bond portion of it, unless it's a level payment that they make, and sometimes cities and districts do that, then it's likely to go down some as new assessed value comes out. So it could be, instead of what we say 210 or 2978, that the year following it, it could be down slightly there.
Councilor McKinney? Councilor Johnson?
And the other thing to keep in mind is that $42 that you guys have outlined here, that's if we reduce our rate from $4.38 back to the $2.48.
Yes.
Correct?
Correct.
Okay, cool. Number two is, I'm a little confused as to how the facilities are gonna work. Are we still gonna own the fire stations? Are we giving those to TVF&R? Are they leasing it? How is that working? And I'm sorry, I didn't find that in the.
So it's in our agreement, and so I don't make a mistake, probably the best thing is to have Chief Holman come back up here and our city attorney to help answer that question. And then I'll just sit over here to the side.
Okay.
So Les, come on.
Les?
Was that in there? I didn't see it.
Les Hallman, TVF&R. Actually, when you make a decision July 1, TVF&R will sit back down with you and negotiate what it looks like after annexation. So that's actually part of the negotiation. Typically in an annexation, just like we did with District 2, you turn over all assets to the fire district. That obviously helps us reduce our cost to the taxpayers, because if you don't turn over the assets, then we got to come up with a way to build new fire stations and everything else. So typically it is, we assume all assets. So.
Mr. Stone?
Truman Stone, City Attorney. What I would say is, we negotiated a 2-year contract for how things were going to operate during this trial period. There would be a separate contract based on annexation, and some of those details would have to be worked out. And obviously, the council would have a role in deciding some of those details and where we want to negotiate and how that would work. But I think Chief's correct. Certainly the city would have no use for a fire station if we were out of the fire business. But then there'd just be a matter of whether there'd be a lease payment or whether it'd be transferred or otherwise sold.
Did that answer your question, Councilor McKinney?
What indebtedness do we still have on those assets?
Mr. Zook?
Matt Zook, Finance Director. We just paid off the debt on the fire station this year, in fact, or last year. We didn't levy any tax rate for that. It basically was 1997 or 98, one of those 2 years. So we basically made our final payment this year, so there is no debt on that.
Station 21?
The one across the street here, or over here? I don't know the numbers, so not the newer one, but the one that's just right here
you.
across this street, yeah.
Did you have another question? Councilor Essen?
So as I understand it, it's just strictly in tax rates, we have a 19 difference between our current contract, 19.1978 difference, and the 209. So for that difference, we get double the personnel we had and all the equipment that they provided, and that seems like a pretty good deal. And the issue gets to be whether or not we're going to reduce that tax, and that's what I think that the Taxpayers Association is going to worry about, and we're going to have to talk about what we'll do with that. But as far as fire is concerned, we're getting a much better deal than we have now, and that's what we were looking for when we decided to do this. It wasn't a way to increase or decrease the total taxation. It was, how are we going to provide this service? So with that being said, my major concern is there seems to be a little difference. I think I'm hearing Tualatin thinking that we're going to turn that fire station over that I'm worried about. And I'm hearing that the city attorney saying, well, we're going to have to negotiate that. Is that correct? Okay.
I don't know, I don't understand the question. Let's
Okay.
let the city
So-
manager give a try.
Mayor, if I understand, what you're asking is if there was a transfer to TVF&R, first, are the stations going to stay and who's going to own them, okay? What you've heard from TVF&R and everything that I've heard and the rest of the staff, is fire stations aren't going to go away because they need fire stations in order to provide the service. What you also heard is that, and this is the part of negotiations, is that TVF&R, where Chief Holman's going, well, what is the typical situation that happens in annexation? And annexations don't occur all the time. Most recent ones that we've looked at to try to compare are things like Washington County 2 that just happened in the last fall, Westland, and quite a while back are Beaverton. In those situations, there's a negotiation process to say, well, does the city still have some interest? What's the interest? And is the interest of like the general taxpayer that it should just be turned over? You know, that's one argument. Another one is, well, it's a city that, like we mentioned here, that you have a budget that has property taxes and other items. And unless it's just like a bond that was maybe issued for fire service, an argument can be made, well, that's a general asset of the city. That's the part that's negotiated as we get to the point, if you decide that and taxpayers, to the taxpayers, that the 210 is worth it for the services that provided. But 210, very important, that I think as we look at it, 210 is the cost of whether you're in Beaverton, Westland, or here. And it doesn't change within the district. So if I'm a taxpayer, which I am, I look at that, I look at my tax bill, and I can say, I know max, it's going to be 210. It might be slightly lower because of the bonds being paid off. So that's what I have to compare. And then the rest of it is up to the council to decide if you do anything to offset, meaning take the money that were translated into property tax that we're using now. Do you reduce the city's $4.53 tax bill?
I guess my concern is,
Councilor Essen, please.
yes, sir, sorry. Sometimes I forget to go through the mayor, and I apologize. But my concern is, we're not just turning over the fire station, but the land that goes with it that has a lot of value. And not only would it be on the other end of town, but this end of town. And I want to make sure that everybody's aware that that's a lot of money, and maybe that they need to, or we need to make sure that that's what we're including into it. And if it is, fine and dandy, but I don't want anybody going into this thinking that it's one way and it's another, and it turns out to be another. That's it.
You through?
I'm through.
Your mic?
Mr. Mayor, could I just say one thing about
Yes,
that?
Councilor, Mr. Stone.
Again, council members, the decision has to be made first whether the city's going to annex into the fire district. At that point, there's going to be negotiations of a lot of those details on how that's going to occur. And so we're somewhat putting the cart before the horse and having this discussion until the council actually makes a decision that, yes, in fact, that's the direction you want to go. And so what we're here tonight talking about is the next steps for the research and such on heading that direction so that you have additional information to make that decision, not if that decision gets made, what are the details of how that will be implemented. Does that make sense? You look confused, Councilor Johnson.
Response?
Councilor Essen.
Well, it's sort of like the Taxpayers Association. They're looking at the worst case scenario for them, or for the taxpayers, is which we didn't take and spend the money automatically somewhere else when we haven't made the decision what to do at all on that. And in this situation, we've got Tualatin assuming when you turn over all your equipment, you're also turning over all your buildings, and you're saying there's a negotiation involved. And I just wanted to make sure we were clear on that as far as council, that there is a negotiation involved. I think I'm hearing yes.
City Manager.
Mr. Mayor, Council, I don't know that they're assuming that. You heard Chief Holman say this is what typical, but what you did hear is that's a negotiated item on both sides.
There are some legal considerations on, and some frequently asked questions that come out, and I'd like to turn this over to our city attorney, Mr. Stone, right now.
Did you have specific questions about that, Mr. Mayor?
Well, the process, board role, voting requirements, city versus.
Okay, I can go through again. And for members in the audience, there's a document back there, frequently asked legal questions. So the mechanism for the city to annex into the district is governed by state law, specifically Oregon Revised Statute 198.866. And this applies only to cities annexing into a special district. The process is that the city, through the governing body, which would be the city council, proposes annexation to the district board. And you do that through a formal process of a resolution. The resolution then would go to the district board for its consideration. The district board would either approve or disapprove that proposal. And under certain circumstances, the district would be required to call an election. Under the circumstances with the city of Newberg, that would not be required. So if the district board approves the city's annexation proposal, that's essentially all of the activity that occurs between the city council and the district board. Now, there's some other steps to complete it, both with Washington County, which is the kind of the home county for the Tualatin Valley Fire District. There are steps to be taken through the Oregon Department of Revenue to set tax rates, and there's some administrative steps that have to happen, but essentially nothing would come back to the city council for a decision. If we were in a situation where a vote was required within the district board would, through an order, would set an election date. They would transmit that back to the city, and so you'd have two parallel elections. One would be within the district itself, and on that very same date, the city would have an election, and presumably both would have to pass for the annexation to occur. So there was a question about whether electors within the city could essentially force a vote. There's nothing in the statute that provides for that mechanism. A question was asked of me whether the city could hold an advisory vote, and the answer to that is yes. The city council could refer to the voters a non-binding advisory vote. We have checked with the Yamhill County Clerk's Office, and their estimation for the cost to hold such a vote would be roughly $50,000. I think it was $47,000 something dollars. So that is an option to the council. Under the statutes, that would not be a binding vote. It would be an advisory vote only. And the city would bear the cost of that special election. And then on the bottom of page 2 is a copy of the actual statute, 198866, annexation of city to a district. And again, we're only speaking about the city itself. The Newberg Rural Fire Protection District has their own choice to make. Their board is in the same way that you're considering things here tonight. They've been meeting. Tualatin Valley folks have been going to their board meetings and having discussion with them on how they want to proceed. There's no requirement that both the rural district and the city have to approve the annexation to occur. So they're really two separate procedures, two separate governing bodies, and two separate decisions that need to be made. And with that, Mayor, that concludes comments I have.
Any questions from yes, Councilor McKinney?
There is no indication from TVF&R's board that they're going to require an election that would trigger a simultaneous election at the civic level. Is that true?
That's the information we have. Again, these would be special elections that need to be called, and I'm not sure what the district election cost would be, but I'm quite confident it would be significantly more than the $50,000 that the city's special election would be. I don't know if you folks have any estimate on what that would be.
Follow on.
Follow on.
None of the elections would meet the necessary timeline prescribed in our agreements, our IGA with TVF&R, correct?
it would be very difficult at this stage in the process to get elections in to meet that time deadline.
Well, the upcoming election, filing for the upcoming election has already come and gone, correct?
That's correct. This would have to be a special election at some future date. And I guess let me just back up. Even if we had made a decision earlier to be placed on a May ballot of this spring, it still would have been a special election. The city would have still had to pay.
Any further questions for City Attorney? Councilor Edison? For the City Attorney.
City Attorney.
Thank you.
So you will be going into negotiations, or who's going to be negotiating this at this time? I think we had the city manager doing it previously, but will the city attorney be involved also?
We're not in negotiations yet.
I'm just asking, when negotiations happen, will the city attorney be involved?
There's been no annexation.
That decision's not been made yet, but I would anticipate being directly involved. I was highly involved in the negotiation of the current contract with legal counsel from Tualatin Valley, who's also here tonight.
Okay, but I appreciate the intricacies of what you're saying there.
Okay. If I may, I'd like to revisit so that it's clear in my mind the status of and what the acronym represents in the way of an impact on property owners and renters. If Chief Hallman would restate the status of our ISO ratings.
Les Hallman, Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue. As Chief Sherrard had testified to you earlier, the current City of Newberg ISO rating is a 3 inside the city. That was what was already held. As TVF&R is now a contract provider, that is still the rate that's being followed. If you approve an annexation with TVF&R, now TVF&R owns this district, if that makes sense, and the ISO rating that TVF&R enjoys would then be overlaid over City of Newberg, which is an ISO rating of 2.
And currently it is what?
It's a 3, so it would drop from a 3 to a 2. And that's good. The lower the number, the better, I should say.
So there could be, for those homeowners and or renters that have insurance that is based on an ISO, that could be dollars in their pocket.
Yes, sir, it could. I caution you.
guarantee.
Okay, yes, no guarantee, because
Understood.
every insurance company is different.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, now, while you're there, how absolutely critical, without negotiations for maybe an extension to work some things out, how critical is this deadline that has been presented to us?
So the July 1 deadline, Truman, I know you don't have the contract in front of you, I don't have it in front of me. The deadline was simply to say, yes, we, the City of Newberg, foresee a permanent relationship. It's not saying that's you got to vote by then. It's just saying you're nodding your head, yes, we want to go forward with this and make this happen. Does that make sense, Mr. Mayor? In other words, we needed by July 1, Intergovernmental Council just needed to know we're either going to go forward or we need to start working very quickly to go backward and uncouple. Does that help a little bit?
It's a good question. That's, needs to be posed to the.
So July 1 was a decision date. We're either moving forward or we're not moving
But
forward.
it's not a thumbs up, thumbs down.
Correct. You're in essence saying we feel thumbs up.
Councilor McKinney.
I think is what you want from the council tonight is the approval to have the consultants proceed. And
We're making no decisions tonight.
well, I know, but we can offer consensus amongst us as peers.
Is there any
to
reason
be
why
able
they
to do
shouldn't
that?
go forward?
Why,
Go ahead.
correctly.
Go ahead.
And then the other one is that with the understanding, as Les continues to remind us, that July 1st, they need to know.
I don't think he needs to be reminded to remind us.
Well, but I was addressing us. The two
No,
things that you're
understood.
looking for
Thank you.
tonight is consensus among, at the Diet for the consultants to proceed, because the critical timeline implies they need to have started last month, all right? And that we're still moving towards this critical July 1st deadline. Those are the two questions that need to be answered, or consensus that needs to be arrived by the council tonight. Is that correct?
I haven't framed that yet. No, I don't know. I would ask of the council, is there any reason why they shouldn't proceed?
None.
I don't have a reason.
Now, that's for canvassing the community.
Absolutely.
Is there any reason why they shouldn't proceed with canvassing the community? Councilor Eskin, you had something you wanted to offer?
I just said I don't have any reasons. There's nothing I can think of.
And what was the other one that you wanted that I hadn't framed yet? That one I
That we
had.
all understand July 1st is the day that we need to be shooting for.
Well, I think Les has made that very clear.
What we're basically asking is, what does the public think? Is that, I mean,
No,
we're not.
we're the consultants that have been retained, if I may, retained by TVF&R are looking to, should they continue with the process that they've been asked to start doing focus groups and gathering information to tell us what essentially is the pulse of the community.
And they're anxiously awaiting,
So how's that different from what the public thinks?
since they're a month
Say
late
what?
already.
So how is that different than what I said?
Well, I guess I didn't understand what you said.
Okay, well then
That-
we're in
that-
agreement.
My apology. Okay. So I see no resistance to either one of those. But not a thumbs up, thumbs down on July 1. All right. Counselor McKinney?
I appreciate all of you in attendance here tonight. These are difficult matters. These are not simple negotiations. It makes all the difference in the caliber of firefighters that we have in the future for this town. My sole responsibility is to do what's right for my neighbor on the north, south, east, and west. I want to make sure that their questions are answered, but more importantly, I want to make sure that it makes financial sense for them and their household to understand what the value of annexation is to Tualatin Valley. We have a great opportunity here to ensure our fire department's future for this particular community. I'm looking forward to the community understanding the great asset and the great possibilities that are available to us at a very small dollar amount.
Are there, Counselor Essen?
I want to acknowledge the community's concerns, and we're aware that we have your full and undivided attention on this. And that we want to make sure that you're kept abreast of what we're doing so that you don't get hit with something by surprise. And so stay tuned.
My question to the council, have you gotten, at this juncture, your questions and concerns answered? And if not, raise your hand right now so we can get the wheels spinning to get those answers for you. Yes, sir.
I would like to
Your mic, please.
I would like us to be able to articulate for ourselves and to the public exactly how many dollars it is now compared to how many dollars it's going to be in the future to be able to secure this, so that we can look at the minimal number of dollars it's going to be able to tell our people is that for X amount of dollars, this is the bang for the buck.
City manager?
Mayor and council, so can we take a look at the sheet right here? So I think the answer is this. The answer if we were to annex and go to the fire district, it would be $2.10 or 2.09 if you want to look at that. You multiply that against what your assessed value is, and you'd find that either online with the Amhill County assessor, or if you have your last tax bill, you take the current value and multiply it by the 210, divide it by 1,000, and that will tell you how much your tax will be for next year. Right now, and so that's what it will be, the 210 times that. If you go, okay, what is it if I don't go with TVF&R, okay, I can tell you what it is with this current contract. And what it is in the current contract is you take that same process, you take $1.90 and multiply that by your assessed value. Now, what's missing out of that for the future is that there is no guarantee. It's just the opposite of a guarantee. We have a contract with TVF&R for fire service. When that ends, there's absolutely no guarantee that TVF&R would continue on a contract with us. So you can't assume that let's just keep going. That's also why I put the 2015-16. That was the last year that we had the fire department. So if we went back, and I know it's real rough, but if you go back to the last time we had the fire, and these are big assumptions, got the equipment back, got the firefighters back, got leadership back on there, it cost us at that time $1.80. The problem with that scenario of going back to where they are is the reason why this whole conversation started. We didn't believe that 2 years ago that service was good enough for residents, that we didn't have enough professional we had volunteers, but volunteers can't be there all the time like a professional person that you're giving a paycheck. So if we go back to that time, then we have no guarantee that we'll get enough volunteers. We might, but it'd still be volunteers. And we had the problem of, at that time, our equipment was failing, and we didn't have the money to replace that equipment with new equipment. So you'd go back to 2015-16, so you have about how much we spent to it, and then you'd have to get the people, get some new equipment, and potentially new people. So to that public, we know how much it will be if we go with TVF&R, and we know how much it is right now. And that sheet tells anyone if they go down, and we'd be glad to, and if Aaron's doing a story or graphic, and just say, if that's not, if it's, this is out there for anybody to pull off of, and I'll say it'll be on our website if it isn't already. It's in the packet, but someone can do that, and then if it's too confusing, the numbers, that they can call me or the finance director, and we'll walk through their property to do that also.
Follow on.
Follow on?
It was a great explanation, but it wasn't the answer to the question. I want to know what the real difference figure is going to be. Is it 0.9978? Because I'm not proposing anything backwards at all. I want to know crystal clear what is the anticipated, close to the best crystal clear actual difference figure going to be as we proceed with annexation. I'm familiar with the process. I can see the figures. I want to know if the 0.19.78 figure is going to materialize.
Mayor and council, the answer is, if we go with the fire district, it's $2.10 or 2.09. That is what the cost of a taxpayer.
Follow on.
Follow on?
It's going to be 2.8 or 0.08 down in there. but then we're subtracting out this average household or whatever. So in terms of what people are really going to pay, money out of their pocket, as this procedure hopefully goes out, I've got people out here that are saying, tell me how many cents per month it's going to be. It's not $2.09 or whatever. It's something substantially less than that because you're going to forgive part of their bill. You're taking out $4,500 or $4.58 down into there. It's the difference figure that's going to be the important. That's what these people want to know. How many more cents on a monthly basis, on an annual basis, is it going to cost me to proceed with this TVF&R, whatever? It's not complicated. How many more cents per month? Correct?
Yeah, Mayor, Council, tonight is a work study session. So, as we've already said, you can't make that decision tonight. The amount of money that a taxpayer would pay would be completely in your hands. One scenario that was here, and the question was how much does it cost us right now? And that's where the $1.90 is. There can be a case made very easily that says, right now, all the residents, as part of our permanent rate, pay $4.38 in property taxes. If you choose, which is absolutely in your authority, that's your job, per se, is to say, reduce it by the amount that it cost us for fire. What we've shown on the paper is $1.90. How much you reduce tax is all up to you.
Councilor Johnson?
The mayor asked if we had any more questions that we'd need answered before we could make a decision. I do have a couple.
We're not making any decisions.
I know, but in the future, I'm giving you what you want.
You have a question?
Yes.
Thank you.
Here it comes. First off, I'd love to see the budgetary impacts of reducing our budget, our tax rate by the 208 or the 210 versus the 190 to see what that does to our general fund. Okay. Number two, I'd like to see what the process is for permanently reducing our tax rate from the.
No, we don't want to reduce our tax rate. We might reduce what we assess, but that tax rate is fixed.
Well, but if we're gonna, if we are peeling off a fire department.
We have a fixed tax rate.
Yeah.
It's statutorily. We may not assess all of that.
Okay. But then
I'm
at any
playing
point.
semantics with you.
Yeah, but then at any
But
point.
we don't want to reduce the rate.
Guys are in semantics at this particular
That's
Yeah.
right. What you assess, you may want to reduce.
But then it's my understanding that in the future, a council could pump it back up without a vote of the people. Is that correct?
I can't answer that one. I don't know.
Okay. Well, that would be my other question, is if we just reduce the rate and not permanent, what's the process for raising it back up without a vote? And then the third thing I'd like to see is a timeline for putting some advisory votes on the November 17 election and when those deadlines would be to get language to the county clerk to make that happen, and the cost associated with doing an advisory vote in November. Those would be the three things I need.
Follow on. When is the next free election? I don't think it's November of 17.
2018, isn't it?
November of 18, I know, is a free election.
It would be in 2018.
Thank you. Councilor Essen?
So, but to be clear, even though you don't want to talk about going back, because we don't want to do that, because we've got such a great deal, and we're going to get double the number of people we had before, we're going to have brand new equipment, and we're going to have all that. We don't want to talk about that. But if we were wanting to talk about that, we would want to talk about the fact that Chief Hallman isn't coming back. He now works for the Tualatin Fire District. And we would have to go out and hire all new people. and most of our equipment would we have to replace, we're talking millions. So it's not going to be that easy. To go forward is the right way to go. I think what I just heard was we may need to get at least an advisory vote from the public to know exactly what options are in the future, so we know what, at least they get a say into what may happen to the future tax rates. That's a proposal. We haven't decided that either.
Thank you all for your participation tonight to the council. We appreciate it. The questions, the insights, the concerns that have been expressed. I think the staff has got some work that they need to do to help respond to some of your concerns and your inquiries. And I thank those that were here from Tualatin Valley Fire to respond to the questions, give us an insight of where you think we'll be going. And I sincerely appreciate those members of the community that sat through this discussion. Hopefully you gained some information, hopefully some insights as to what is going on or what may be proposed, and kind of some of the wrestling matches we have as to what is the best thing for the city. And unless there is anything further to come before us this evening, staff has their marching orders of things that we need to work on. Is there anything else to come before us this evening?
Move to adjourn.
There's been a motion to adjourn. Do I hear a second?
Second.
It's been seconded. There's no further discussion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, we are adjourned.
As well as the repairs we do. Turn in your claim and relax. We'll take it from here.
J&W Car Stock Collision Repair.